one of the themes of this whole weekend is CalArts Mafia, hashtag CalArts Mafia. It's the idea that CalArtians stick together, we are proud of where we come from, we create a lot of things together, we've worked together a lot. Okay, so on those themes, Michael, we hear you grew up very much around this community. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, as they introduced, my father, Robert Fitzpatrick, was president here for 13 years. So we moved from the East Coast to here as a small child. I used to come to CalArts from the time I was 5 years old on, and that was, I'm old, so that was back in the late 70s. Which was a pretty radical time for this school. I mean, this school was known to be maybe the most creative art institution in all of America at that time, with people like Mike Kelly and just some really radical art being created here. And for me as a young kid, it was a pretty amazing experience to be exposed to some of the most forward-thinking modern dance music being created in the country, and that was sort of the backdrop for me as a child. So I came to many events here, and my father being the president, we hosted a lot of things at our home, so had the crazy experience of having like the gamelan in our backyard, and that was just, to me, was a normal thing to have the African dancers and the gamelan in our backyard. And then subsequently after that, my father departed for other endeavors. And then when I decided to go to school, I had a strong interest in film. I had gone actually to a high school called Los Angeles County High School for the Arts, where just by chance my good friend over here, James, we both went to this arts high school, which was the first public arts high school in all of Los Angeles. And I studied music. I was a singer, a vocalist, and he was in the instrumental part of the music program there.
In high school?
In high school. And then I came here and thought I wanted to be a filmmaker. I had worked for a few years, taken time off from high school to college, and worked on feature films in Los Angeles, and decided I wanted to pursue being a director. So I came to CalArts and had a course in experimental film, which was, really a transformative experience for me, because it was obviously about experimental film, but ultimately it was about so many other elements to this institution that are available to you when you come here, So for me, this is where I met James, and I put my first band together of a bunch of muso jazzers trying to play rock and roll. And taking courses like semiotics and being exposed to really avant-garde filmmaking and modern dance, and all of those things kind of collectively really helped to shape, obviously I left school and decided that I wanted to pursue music, but that whole palette of what I learned, especially in the film department and with semiotics and all that kind of stuff, was something that just informed every decision, especially being in this modern day, everything has a visual component to it. So sort of, pull back from that well of that filmmaking period in my education, often for what James and I do.
Did you have any idea back then that video would become such a big part of music, the visual element?
Yeah, because I think by that time we had already seen, we were well past the MTV generation and could see that everything was now having a synonymous visual element to whatever you were doing sonically. And as time grew, obviously, then you just had YouTube and you had all these other visual platforms. So it's sort of like, in this day and age, you can't not have the visual element be a part of what you're thinking about when you're creating even a pure piece of music.
It's a very great point for a lot of musicians in the audience. Definitely, thanks. So you met here, not in high school.
No.
Not in high school. But yeah, we went through the same high school program. For me, it was sort of a feeder program into here, in a way. I had older friends who had graduated LACSA, LA County High School for the Arts, and ended up coming here, came back and said, dude, jam sessions till 2 a.m., you gotta go there. So I came here. It was pretty much as simple as that. And my relationship with this place growing up was thinking, we'd set out on road trips and we'd leave greater LA, and then I'd think, what is this weird landscaped oasis that says CalArts on it? And ended up coming here. I imagined, people wearing turtlenecks and basket weaving. I didn't really understand what it was about, and so, but yeah, and early on when I came here, I remember watching, they screened in the Bijou, early promotional film that Walt Disney had made about this place, and it was kind of before it had become a reality, before they had secured this building and this location. But we envisioned, CalArts, this community, and it was that beatnik looking, people dancing on, and there's a guy writing poetry in the corner, and like all in the same room. And it was super cheesy, but the thing was that in a way it was that, because of the atmosphere that I was plunged into here was one of such collaboration, and that pretty much governed everything I did after. Being here in the early mid-90s, I was here for the famous earthquake semester of 94. When the Northridge earthquake hit on January 17th, it changed this entire campus and this entire student body that was here at this time, because we had to all go to makeshift buildings around Santa Clarita. The dance school had to be bused to Pasadena. The jazz school was down the street at a synagogue. I mean, we were really grasping to keep the school together. And during that semester, when we didn't have the use of the main building, ironically, it brought a lot of different métiers together that would, for me at least, I wouldn't have collaborated with half of the people I did had we not had this lack of structure and all this free time to be kind of huddled in a tent making art together. And that's really what it was at certain times. So that was a big part of my formative years here.
Thanks. And you two were in separate programs. How did you meet? How did you start the band? Was it here?
No. We didn't start the band here, but we had, as I said, I put my first real true band together, and they happened to all be part of the music program. And this is a small school relative to very large universities. So you might not know everybody, but you at least have a sort of a visual cue on everybody. And half of my band were all part of this collective of these guys that James was a part of. They also had a separate band that was this band called Vermicious Canids, that was this crazy muso pop jazz.
Yeah, we took over this place, man.
They wore wild costumes, and
They ended
and
up
so
in your backyard.
James and I knew each other from that, and then
I have to segue, just to give you an idea of a Canids show. Like, picture the Halloween party in the main gallery, which is crazy enough, but then picture mice with parachutes coming off of the mezzanine into the crowd. And really, this was not my idea, but
Wait, real mice?
real mice.
Live mice parachuting off the mezzanine. It was terrible. There was a revolt against the band after this, and justifiably so, because it was a nightmare. But anyway, and so there was like one guy on a tricycle who would come out in the crowd and break plates on his head, and then they'd roll out a slip and slide with lard and raw meat on it, and we'd slip and slide into the crowd, and then one guy would set that guy on fire, and then another guy would come out.
And somewhere in there you did play music, right?
Oh yeah, hard music. Yeah.
Just
Hard music. That was when I played my first. I was only an alto sax player before I joined the Canids, and I started playing Barry, and I was about 4'10" back then.
That's where
and,
it all began.
yeah, so I started playing Barry sax then, and that kind of formed what I do now. instead of a Mercury helmet with wings on it and being painted silver, I wear this fedora all the time.
But we knew each other in that period. We were
like sort of.
No, we definitely did. We were definitely of the deviant element, probably, of the school at that time. And then James and I always kept in contact over the years, and I had there was a brief stint there in my career where I tried to do music, tried to have bands, band after band, and I couldn't find any success there, so I sort of pivoted to working for a producer that was working on other people's albums. And in that period, he started getting calls from advertising agencies looking for music for advertising, but they wanted real artists, people that had a perspective to bring what I term hipster jingles, music that sounds like it could be made by an artist. And he and I, as opposed to just stock, and he and I did that company for 7 years, and in that time, James and I reconnected even more because there would always be these sessions where I would need saxophone or flute. He's an amazing flautist as well. And then there was an opportunity to bring in a bunch of these other composers and have them try and create their own works for these things. And that whole period was the first time for myself as an artist that I actually was sustainable and making a living from making music. And that period actually was the twofold. Was one, the training ground for me where I literally was writing 2 to 3 pieces of music a day, very strict deadlines, a lot of revising, a lot of back and forth with these clients. And so it's sort of the school of hard knocks of just having to be efficient in my ability to create music. And that, for me, really, as a technician and a producer and engineer, got my chops up in being able to create my own music in my own bedroom with a laptop. And also, at the same time, was able to create enough of financial stability for myself that when James and I wrote the first songs for Fitz and the Tantrums, we had all these crazy moments that happened where, what I love about our band is that everybody in the band, had spent their whole entire lives dedicated to their craft. But none of us had really had any success. We were all just sort of, putting together job by job to make it, to survive. And as soon as we had our first show, there was a different energy. Karmically, it could felt like almost in the room, and maybe that was also we were just better at what we did by that time. But we had all these crazy opportunities from a very early point of the band, things that never happened where, we played a handful of shows and then we got asked to go on tour with Sharon Jones and the Dap Kings and Maroon 5 and Flogging Molly, all these big bands, and we're like, yay, okay, but how are we gonna pay for it all? And the good fortune was that I had success doing that business and basically took the entire life savings that I had and put it into helping us, because every one of those tours they'd be like, you get to go on tour with Sharon Jones and Maroon 5, but it's going to cost $25,000 to do it. You're not going to make a penny. You're going to be in a little van driving across the country trying to keep up with this big superstar band. But the universe was saying, do it. We could all just feel there was something. So we went ahead, everybody in the band, that was used to like getting paid per session, per job, being paid by big artists to go out, had to basically go out and work for free. And we did that, and I took this savings and we just kept going out there in the world to the point that it finally, we could actually finally buy dinner.
It's hard to, yeah. It's hard to understate the importance of those early days in our band, because it really was a moonshot, and a lot of us, myself included, were just take no prisoners, hired gun journeyman musicians who wouldn't take no flack from, you know, some guy saying, come tour with my band for free, you know. But we all believed in it, and we all had a stake in it, and we all had enough of a creative part in it that we wanted to see it flourish. And yeah, man, those were hard times, the van tours, right?
Yeah, I would never go back.
Well, that was all really amazing to hear the breadth of experience you've had, and it seems like you've also every single person in your band has such knowledge and, like you said, dedicated their lives to their craft, such diversity of experiences and genres, like especially you guys being from CalArts. Mm-hmm. I'm going to play a video because we're going to talk about influences for just a second.
Uh-oh.
That's a fun one.
Our silhouettes are so different.
Oh, it is? There's definitely like Motown, some James Brown, jazz.
Yeah.
You have a lot of influences from everywhere.
OJs.
And even not from music, like video. Are there any other creative arts that you're particularly inspired by?
Yeah, I can pinpoint a inspirational moment from here was the late Bill Moritz's animation class that I took as a critical studies class my first year here, and blew my mind wide open. The visual element, the early experimental animation and music, painting and things like that. I see a through line to this aesthetic from that.
Yeah, I mean, and for me, obviously, studying the experimental film I was introduced to the concept, you know, growing up in Los Angeles, you know, to be told that there's a style of filmmaking that doesn't involve narrative, you know, is a shocking concept, and to be exposed to Mike Snow and Breckenridge, all this kind of outside stuff really changed my whole perspective. And to have, you know, we both grew up in Los Angeles. Los Angeles is such a disconnected metropolis, where you go from your home bubble to your car bubble to your work bubble, and there's not a lot of common space that isn't the Americana, you know. So I think it's a very isolating sort of existence, and for me, one of the most profound things about being here at CalArts was that I was part of a community, and for my senior thesis, I made a 30-minute non-narrative film that was a use of, I had found all this old, at a garage sale, all these clips from a family, they're Super 8 films, and I took the film, transferred it, and edited it into a false narrative with a deeply personal voiceover narrative that was totally constructed but wove out of truth and not. And because I had been studying a lot of semiotics then, it was all a play on language as well. And then, you know, had the showing down at the Bijou and had 50 people watch this 30-minute film. And then we had a critical discussion about the film for an hour and a half. And to this, you know, one of the greatest shocks for me was when I graduated from CalArts and left, was that sense of loss of community and having a place where you could make something radical or very avant-garde and have this community that was interested, that supported you, that was willing to sit there and have a critical discussion about it. And to me, that was one of the greatest gifts of being here, was being a part of that community and being all the different mediums all in one place together, where you could do a collaboration with the music department. Or for me, I had a lot of friends, you know, I had grown up with a lot of modern dance, and it's still one of, you know, the things that I truly love, and so was able to do cool collaborations with other students from other departments. And to me, that, to this day, I feel like I still miss that sense of community, because I never found the same level of it ever since.
I think a lot of CalArtians worry about that, like being in the real world, not getting to be in a place where you can potentially be as critical about avant-garde work. So
yeah, I remember starting here, and just the landscape of Santa Clarita changed while I was here, right? Mm-hmm. Before the Best Buy and all that stuff was there on the other side of the freeway, it was kind of, and you know, we'd sit out there at Chenard, and the alumni from the 70s would come up with swirls in their eyes and go, man, when I was here, that was all onion fields, man. We used to trip out there, and like, you know, and now look, and it's, you know, I'm that guy.
It happens to all of us.
Man, we used to go out to the old road and like blow up pianos and stuff, and now civilization is lapping up on the shores here. It's like you can't, you know. I know that the legend of Tim Burton, who went here and made Edward Scissorhands, and that was just an allegory for CalArts, right? It was like the mad genius on the hill, and everyone hated him, and it was all just, you know, milk toast, cookie cutter suburbia below, and it was directly, everyone who went here knew, oh yeah, that's that. But it's really true. And then you get out of here, like Michael says, and you have to engage with the rest of the world, and your community is the whole world. It's not just these like-minded freaks. So you have to, it's such a delicate balance, right? I mean, how do you engage? How do you hold your peers and be held by your peers to a high artistic standard and feel like you're saying something meaningful, and also buy a house,
make a living at,
oh yeah,
and make a video that's seen by 1 million people instead of, you know, 2,000.
all very real concerns, and I just graduated, so fun stuff.
God help you.
On that note, what have been some of your biggest failures or challenging moments?
Failures or challenges?
Or triumphs, but you know, failures are always a little more interesting.
I think, you know, there was that sort of idea when you left here, was how to still find a way to create and balance the reality that you have to make a living, and you have to pay your bills, and you have to survive. And, you know, I had been here studying for a film degree, put my first band here together, as I said, and then fell in love, back in love with the idea of music. And that was really that moment when technology converged with the craft. You know, I spent, you know, 6 months making that experimental film, and spent, you know, every penny I had to do it. And technology had evolved to the point where I had my computer, and if I woke up in the morning and I wanted to create a piece of music, I could create it, and by the end of the day I could have burned it onto a CD, put it into my car, and I'm driving around at the end of the day with something that I created. And I loved that time frame of how quickly I was able to just realize something, and for me personally, why it was so difficult to entertain filmmaking, because filmmaking is such, I don't know, maybe because I'm ADD, but that longer arc was something I couldn't wrap my head around. So when I went back in the world and decided, hey, I just got, called my dad and said, I know I just graduated with a film degree, but I'm going to pursue music. Wasn't thrilled with that conversation, but what ensued after that was a good 6-7 years of being so single-minded in my objective, that I wanted to be an artist, wanted to make music with my band and have success in that world. And that was my objective and my only objective. And I suffered nothing but abject failure, rejection, couldn't get arrested, couldn't get a single person to reply or even listen to my music, let alone come down to a show at whatever Viper Room or whatever nightclub on the Sunset Strip. And it was, I think, only with a little bit of maturity and more so a lot more desperation that I began to widen what I saw as my possibilities. That, okay, you've been trying to do this one particular thing with music, it's not happening right now, let's broaden the perspective what that is, let's start working for other people, let's start doing this. And the lesson that I learned for me was that I wish that I had had more of that open-mindedness right out the gate, because as soon as I opened up that perspective, then I started working, and then I was all of a sudden working within a community and making connections with other people, with other industry people and stuff, that if I had had that more macro vision right out of college, I probably would have achieved more success in what I actually wanted to do sooner, rather than being so fascist in what my goal was for so long that I was always on the outside trying to get into that bubble. And as soon as I opened it up, I found myself quickly in the center of it, not doing exactly what I wanted to, but I was still creating music. I was still getting to be creative and getting paid to be creative. And as soon as I was in there, I started making those relationships that would eventually lead to what that primary goal was in the first place.
Yeah, I can kind of identify with that too. The first 10 years after graduation kind of sped by. I turned around and looked back and realized, wow, I started out collaborating with some people from here, made some really cool records with some music school alum people who I had met here, and then as time went on, I became more and more just a hired gun and doing work that really wasn't satisfying. And that's around the time that we hooked up, so it just kind of funneled out from there too. I don't know, as a freelance musician, which is what I pretty much had set myself up to be from the time I was 5 years old, I didn't really see any other way of doing it. The things you get prepared to do when you're here, and I remember sitting in class with Charlie Hayden and Dave Roytstein and everyone here saying, yeah, man, find your voice, man. And that's all in there. I mean, it made it formed me, but also then you look back, and then I was taking every opportunity with every person, and I didn't really know what that voice was at a certain point. So the freelance world kind of caught up with me in a way that just kind of diffused my focus into too many disparate things.
In a bad way?
Sort of in a bad way. I mean, talk about failures. I mean, there was a time when I had some real genuine freakouts about what am I going to do? Am I going to answer this call for this gig, or am I going to go job hunting so I can pay my student loans? It's really that moment of truth. And I see you smiling.
Yeah, I relate to what you both said so much, both of you. It was a little different from each of you, but...
I mean, there were a couple of do I throw in the towel moments over the years, and I'm glad I didn't.
Wow, I'm just letting it sink in. You're very candid about writer's block, Michael. Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit more about you? But then I heard you were doing like 2-3 songs a day at one point.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the crazy thing about creation is that sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't. And for myself personally, I had to also come to terms and realize that the well is not infinite, and you can burn yourself out. Yeah, I mean, when I was doing more of the hired thing for commercials and things like that, the output was insane, and it got to the point after doing it for 6 or 7 years where I had to take almost a year off of writing anything, because the more I did that, the more success I had, and that, you know, concept of the golden handcuffs becomes a real thing, because you finally get to make a living doing something in your field, and then you keep doing it more and more and more, and then you know, finally can buy yourself a car or buy a house, and then you're committed to this path that you've created for yourself. And then at a certain point, you know, you just can't go forever. And, you know, I had to realize that there was moments of restoration and sort of trying to fill your life with other life experiences to be able to come back and actually have something to write about, you know. And with our band, you know, we were fortunate that we wrote one record. It was very successful for us. It broke us out nationally on the scene. But what nobody told me, and because James and the rest of the band were, as we call, tour dogs, you know, they were hired guns for other people. They knew what touring was like. I had never gone past San Diego as a musician, and I found myself in this experience where all of a sudden we were, you know, we put out that first record that clip that we saw was from, and then we were on the road for 3/4 of the year minimum, for several years, traveling around the world. And came back, and then it's like, okay, well, the record came out a couple of years, you've been busting your butt, you've been out there in the world, but you need to make another record. And we went right in and we wrote 30 songs in 40 days, which was some sort of insane output of just a combination of ambition and total paralyzing fear of failure, that we had to keep this thing going. And then we put that record out, and then that record was even more successful, and then we were on the road for another 2.5, 3 years, traveling a lot. Nobody told me how hard it would be or how taxing it would be to be, because a band, when you're successful, you can only play one place at a time. It's not like a movie that you just put on the internet. Yeah, we put our music out there, but as the way we as musicians really survive now and make up most of our living is from touring. But you're one band, you can only play one city at a time, and then you got to get from Kansas to Chicago, you know, and you just got to get from point A to point B, and it's a very grueling, non-glamorous lifestyle.
Speak for yourself.
Definitely non.
Besides what people,
Yeah.
Yes.
think about it.
It's the grunt work. It's the stuff that people don't think about, and yeah, that sophomore album strikes fear into the hearts of most recording artists.
Many an artist has failed on their second one. Anyways, and to answer your question, then we got off of the road. So cumulatively, that was already like 6-7 years of nonstop touring, where it felt like we were completely disconnected from our actual selves, from our homes. We had, been gone for so long. I lost almost all contact with all my friends, couldn't sustain a relationship, barely spoke to my family, and then came back and it's like, all right, let's write another record. And that's when the most severe form of writer's block I've ever experienced happened. And that was sort of this combination of pure exhaustion and just that long-term effect of being a nomad, is that, for me at least, I felt like we didn't have, or I personally didn't have any sort of grounding moorings in my life that connected me back. And, like I said, the second album we wrote 30 songs in 40 days. The second album we wrote 60 songs in a year plus. Mm-hmm. And to distill those 60 down to the 10 that were worthy enough of being, or 11 that were worthy enough to be on a record. As my wife can attest, I literally those first 4 months went to bed almost in tears every night, because I'm a workaholic, and I will just it just felt like I was running into a brick wall, just bludgeoning myself time and time again, till we finally sort of cracked the code a little bit and got a song that ended up being the biggest song we've ever had on that record. And then things slowly started to flow through there. But, that idea of writer's block is a real thing, and I think you just... as the same concept of being a freelancer, being a freelance artist, the real trick to being a freelancer is being okay with the downtime, being out of work. Mm-hmm. Because as a freelancer, you're always like, you get the relief from getting the job, and as soon as you're like day one of the job, you're already worried, because you know that the job's going to end in 4 days, and then shit, what's the next job going to be? So the art to being a good freelancer is to be okay with that ebb and flow, and likewise for an artist, is to be okay with the writer's block, and that, for me at least with songwriting, you don't write when you're trying to write what we're doing, which is popular music that connects with people. My belief is that you don't get to write a song that has that connection with people every time you write a song. And I think that's what a lot of musicians make that mistake, is that they think everything they do is great. And to me, my theory is that it's like more like you're lucky if 1 out of 10 or 20 songs you write is exceptional.
Oh, that's a miracle. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good record. Okay, I have some quicker questions now. This one is for James. You play like every instrument, first of all, it seems. Can you tell us about your onstage rig? Oh wait.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's me.
Oh my God, he looks so much like you. Yeah, tell him everything you have on stage. Everything.
Okay, that's a Nord keyboard. That's a baritone sax, flute, alto sax, guitar, and tambourine.
Oh no, and the kabasa? No, or a shake.
Oh well, yeah, percussion. Come on.
Yeah, whatever.
I play a mean bongo.
Oh yeah, and the bongos.
Yeah.
He is James honestly might be hands down the best musician out of all of us in the band, and as we've evolved and our sound has evolved, because we've never wanted to make the same record twice, is that's required James more than anybody else in the band to have to step up. And James is an amazing brass player, plays a mean penny whistle, can do percussion, has a massive influence from Cuban music that he brings into anything he does
Ghanaian music.
On percussion. But all of a sudden we were a band that never had a guitar player, and then all of a sudden I put a guitar in a song, and then all of a sudden James, who's not a guitar player, I was like, well, you're gonna have to learn how to play this song on guitar. So James plays guitar. James knows one song on guitar.
Yeah.
What's the song? What is the song?
It's called Spark.
All right,
Yeah.
Take note, everyone.
Yeah.
Another quick question, if this will play. You've played so many venues.
So many venues, and what you don't know about that last clip is that's at like 8:30 in the morning.
Oh yeah.
You've played big, small. Would you get more nervous at one or the other?
This is the most nervous I've been, probably.
Yeah, I mean, I get butterflies, definitely, especially when we're getting to do one of those really sort of bucket list moments, like the first time we walked on stage at Lollapalooza in front of 20,000 people. Your brain can't even wrap your head around how many people you're seeing. But the smaller venues are, I think, the more challenging ones, when you can actually see everybody's faces, and,
You can
or that
see
you know the
everybody.
people in the audience,
That's the
because then
worst.
you know they're judging you.
Worst.
Yeah, or when you're an opening band for a national artist and you go out on a stage and it's 1/10 full and people are like, who are you?
Oh yeah,
And you can see it in their eyes and
we've done
the
that.
vitriol, and then like two people who are really into it, and then you come back to that city and you're headlining and the place is packed and you see those two people and like 10,000 others and you're like, what's up now? It's pretty satisfying.
Playing for family can be hard too. For family and friends.
Oh, absolutely.
So speaking of family, you already talked a lot about your families, but how has being a father changed either of you in your art, if anything?
How hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we were talking earlier, or I was talking earlier about the sort of, the effect of touring was that about 6 or 7 years into it, I really hated it. I hated being on the road because it's your life, but it's not your life. Your life is back at home. And most of the time it's the same 6 of us in the band, the same friggin' 10 of us with our crew. You just see the same faces. Everybody's just buried in their phone trying to like connect back with their world at home. And I got home and I just didn't know who I was anymore or connected to anybody. Like I said, I truly had been gone so much that I wasn't even able to maintain any real connection with any of my friends or my community. So for me to have found my wife and to have kids, we have a second one now, is kind of everything. It's the only thing that grounds me and gives me a thread, a connection back home to make what we do, and how it's not like a 9 to 5 job. It's a 24-hour-a-day job. And like this summer, James and I went out on the road for 2.5 months straight, where we were just gone. And 2.5 months might not sound like a long time, but it's grueling. Mm-hmm. And so for me, to have that connection and to be a father and to have context and meaning for what we're doing makes it all the more.
And when you have kids the ages of our kids, babies and toddlers, and you leave for tour and they're reading Grover, and you come back and they're reading Camus, it's like, wearing black, sequestering themselves in their room, listening to Morrissey.
That's not happened.
No.
It will come, I'm sure.
My wife and kid are right here, and Samantha was there. We started dating around the beginning of this band, so she knew kind of what she was getting into, fortunately, right? And now Julian's here, and I'm reading him my old books and playing him my old records and kind of immersing him in this life. When I was his age, my dad was playing banjo in a Dixieland band. And I went to a Dixieland festival in Sacramento and saw him on stage, and I thought my dad is the most famous guy in the world. And this is awesome. I can't imagine. I brought him out on stage in Seattle in front of 20,000 people, and he was 1. And he's just like, yeah, this is what it's about. Whatever.
Well, my son won't even watch when he comes out on tour for little brief stints. He won't even watch the show unless I guarantee him an appearance during the encore.
Wow.
Yeah.
Jaded already.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Is it weird at all being famous?
It's definitely, I don't know how famous we are, but obviously we have had a certain level of success, but it's definitely a bizarre experience when people know who you are and you don't know who they are, and they just sort of intensely run up to you on the street shouting your name, and you turn around and your normal reaction as a human being is like, where have we met? And then you're like, oh right, I've never met this person.
Or when you more seeing people meet you in public and they're like, hi.
Oh yeah, they're vibrating and nervous, and you're like listen, I put on my pants the same way anybody does.
Girl, I've seen this guy in the morning.
Yeah. Exactly.
We sleep this far away from each other.
Oh yeah. On the bus, it's 6 bunks. 6 bunks. So there's 12 bunks. You get in and you have about that much space.
I can say as a saxophonist, and I use ist, but with a jazz degree, and then I meet sax players on the road, and there's a little bit of spite going on sometimes. They're like, yeah, is that pop band going?
Yeah,
So
well,
you finish your degree, or like never moved to New York, huh?
Right. Well, and
there's a bit of that.
There is that sort of flip side to the culture of a place like this that affords you this amazing creativity, is that there's definitely a bit of snobbery or elitism that comes from, I would say, both of the schools that we went to. You were in the jazz school and I was in the experimental film school. So if you were making a film that actually had like actors telling a story, they were sort of like, or for James, being, in the jazz school here, which is its own very particular purist world, if you're going to go play a 1-4-5 chord progression, I make James play a 1 chord progression through a song all the time. To those jazz musicians, that's
I hear. Look, I went here and not North Texas State for a reason. So there's a level of open-mindedness amongst the alumni here, but there is that thing, you know.
There is that thing.
There is that sell-out thing, you know. Mm-hmm. And the old joke is, yeah, we've sold out the Metro, we've sold out the College, we've sold out the Greek Theater, and we've sold out. You know.
I'm going to use that one.
Definitely gonna use that one later.
Yeah.